cool. There's a little intro video. All right. Welcome, everybody. Doesn't look like we have anybody on quite yet. Hopefully, we'll have a few people join. So, welcome, everybody. Danielle Gianni here. I started my OCD coach in 2019. And this is Erica. She's been a coach with me for a year or two now. And we are here today to answer any questions that you guys have about recovery, OCD. I've been doing a lot of relationship OCD videos lately. There will be other videos coming, but I'm kind of focusing on this particular subset at the moment. But no matter what OCD subset that you have, and most of you have more than one, we are here to answer your questions and help you get to that place where you're feeling more comfortable with getting to that recovery stage and living a life free of OCD. So if you have any questions, type them in the chat. We will be answering them as we go. And Eric and I both completely understand what it's like to have OCD, what that struggle is like. We also know what it takes to recover and eliminate OCD from affecting your life on a daily basis. So we want to be able to share some of that knowledge and that hope with you that OCD, while it can be chronic, it doesn't have to be. So learning how to respond to those thoughts and feelings and triggers that are happening make all the difference in the world, which is a great thing because that means that we can change it. We can, learn to respond differently, which then stops the symptoms of OCD, which is great. So until we get some questions, Erica, do you want to share a little bit about like your story and where you're at with now in your recovery journey?
Sure. I love seeing your kitty.
Oh, she wants to hop in here.
She's having fun. Let's see, my story. Where am I at now? Recovery wise, I feel like OCD is honestly pretty non-existent. I will notice, and obviously you build awareness throughout time as you go through your journey. You build awareness as far as like the intrusive thoughts coming in. So I do still notice some that I'm like, oh, this is definitely not mine, and I just kind of move on with my day, but they don't cause discomfort at all, hardly ever. Obviously, as life goes on and there's new challenges and different changes, I suspect that OCD will arise, but I have that awareness now where it's like, I know what it is. I know how to respond to it and not let it continue. So that's pretty much where I'm at right now.
Good. What does it look like when OCD arises for you? What does that look like for you?
I'm trying to think, when's the last time OCD came up for me?
You can think about it because for me, it's everybody's a little bit different. For me, it's just my brain might want to start to worry about something or start to think about something that isn't perfect in my life somewhere. And so it doesn't feel like OCD anymore for me because I'm able to, use the method that I created to recognize when something uncertain or uncomfortable arises, and I know how to respond so that there is no anxiety spike, there is no discomfort. I usually don't do compulsions, and it just kind of, there's the awareness of something that could become an OCD spiral, and then it fades away. If I do start to overthink something or worry about something, I can detach really quickly. So it doesn't really feel like I have OCD, but I know I do, and I have to keep myself in that recovery stage. So is that what it looks like for you, or is it different?
Yeah, totally. It does. And for a while, at some point, I remember going back to a point, even when I was pretty well recovered and I'd been pretty good. I remember hitting a point where I started to question if I even had OCD again,
Yep.
And I think that's normal because now you're in a different phase and you're like, well, did I ever really have it?
Yep.
Because it almost feels like it's non-existent. But I think the best thing is to just not fixate on that part. Like, obviously that is OCD if you're questioning if you have it. But best thing is not to fixate on that part, and just kind of, you have that level of awareness, you recognize it, and you don't start up any compulsions that could start the cycle again. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Cool. It's a great way to explain it. So, yeah, I have found that awareness is key because a lot of us don't learn. I didn't for a long time. I didn't learn what is the recovery stage? How do I
Mm-hmm.
stay there? And a lot of people don't learn that. So obviously, we stop the OCD cycle by not doing the compulsions, and that can take quite a bit of time to get those down to zero. But then to stay in the recovery stage is all about having that awareness to keep the cycle from starting up again.
Yeah.
And yeah.
And the best thing, well, I wouldn't say the best thing, but one of the positives out of having OCD is you kind of learn to apply either the real method or your ERP to any thought that comes in. It doesn't
Absolutely.
have to be OCD related. You have that choice with every thought, like what you want to give energy to or not. And I think that's such a beautiful thing, because how many of us just live life with just, maybe you're honoring thoughts that maybe aren't even yours, or you know what I mean, and just paying attention to those thoughts, and it takes up so much energy. And
Yeah.
you learn the real method or ERP, you learn to have that, you recognize that you have that choice in what you want to give attention to, which thoughts.
Yeah. And I'd love to hear from anybody listening. What is keeping you stuck in the OCD cycle?
That's a good question.
Do you have all the knowledge, but you have a hard time applying it? Do you not have recovery tools to use? Do you not have support? Where do you feel like you're getting stuck? Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why I created the real method, because the first step of the real method is to recognize uncomfortable thoughts, feelings, or situations that might be showing up in life, and then using the rest of the method. Because so many of us, we go to therapy, we learn exposure, and we know to use exposure and response prevention when we're in that rabbit hole, which is great to get out of the rabbit hole. But then how do we keep ourselves from getting in the rabbit hole in the first place? And that's exactly what we're talking about. So yeah, I love that.
Do we have people on?
Yeah, yep, there
Oh,
are a few
cool.
people still on. Vandela says, hi, I noticed that many of my difficult OCD feelings stem from traumatic events in childhood. Can you talk a little bit about OCD and trauma? Is it a good practice? Is it good to practice unconditional acceptance? So yeah, so OCD and trauma, it's it's a little bit different for everybody. So some people do have those past traumatic events in their life. Some people don't. Everybody's a little bit different. But yes, there is a nature versus nurture element to OCD, right? They think that there is some genetic nature type components to it that we were maybe born with, but there's also the nurture, what we're taught, what we learn, what we don't learn in our life experiences. And so those scary or uncomfortable life experiences can make our nervous system a little bit more sensitive and create fears and avoidance in areas that can feed the OCD cycle. So the great thing about either ERP or the real method that I teach is that these will help with trauma, right? So if you think about someone, for example, maybe there's somebody who was, raped by a stranger and they really struggle with being intimate going forward. That is something that needs to be taken care of, but being able to have intimacy in your relationship is important. So you're going to have to face that uncomfortable situation and expose yourself to it over and over again so that you can get comfortable in those situations. So exposure is very, very beneficial for that trauma, and to be able to reframe the beliefs that you created from that and the fears that you created from that. I'd love to know, Vandela, what you mean by, is it good to practice unconditional acceptance? Because that can mean something a little bit different. But until then, until you add a little bit about that, Erica, what do you think about trauma and OCD?
So I feel like trauma is, so in the pretense that you said it, I agree with what you said. Um, as far as like having that exposure when certain situations come up like that were traumatic. Totally agree. I also think that when you have OCD, there's a time to just kind of like address and focus the OCD initially. And then once you've kind of figured out how to take care of the OCD aspect, I think
Mhm.
naturally you'll start to kind of see where the trauma is, and you can kind of make the connections later on once you know how to handle the OCD, you know. But I think to kind of try to tackle like the trauma part and then the OCD all at once is just it becomes a lot. So I
Mhm.
feel like it's best to like tackle the OCD part first, and then the trauma part will start unveiling itself, and you can start kind of trying to figure that out.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think sometimes what I considered traumatic events in my past, because I was so anxious and insecure and all of that, um, certain things felt more traumatic to me than maybe they would have felt for others. And I used to often blame my anxiety and OCD on those situations. Like, this is why I have OCD, when really it was present long before Daniela is joining us. Hi, Daniela.
Hi.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you. Yep.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, so a lot of that, like I used to kind of blame a lot of things on those events, and they definitely had an impact. Don't get me wrong, but they weren't the reason for my OCD as much as I thought they were. They just played a part in the types of things that I was afraid of, right? And so the solution was the same. I didn't really have to go back and fix anything then. I needed to learn how to deal with fear and discomfort and uncertainty. Not even then, but now. And when I dealt with it now, the past didn't matter as much. Have you found that to be true, Erica?
Um, Not for me, but
Okay.
I totally that makes a lot of sense what you're saying.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I can see that connection for sure.
Yeah. Have you
Yeah.
had to go back and address traumas separately?
Yeah,
Okay.
for sure. Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, but I feel like at the end of the day it's all kind of linked, you know.
it is.
So,
Yeah,
yeah.
it is. Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, and Vendela, in regards to your question about unconditional acceptance of, I'm guessing you're referring to, yeah, just accepting the thoughts, accepting the feelings, accepting everything that comes with it. Yeah, I mean, unconditional acceptance is a big word because if we're depending on what we're talking about, right? What the thoughts, the feelings, or what you're working on accepting. Um, Unconditional acceptance of the thoughts, yes. Unconditional acceptance of our feelings, yes. But there is some gray area. For example, when it comes to, let's say, relationship anxiety, we don't have to unconditionally accept everything, right? We don't want to necessarily overlook our own deal breakers, true deal breakers, not preferences, right? OCD usually focuses on preferences versus deal breakers. But so there is some gray area with unconditional acceptance. But yeah, accepting that whatever thoughts we get, whatever feelings we get, unconditional acceptance there is really important because we can't fully control it. And we're trying to get rid of it just gives it more power. So accepting that we have the thought, we have the feeling is really important, but then focusing on how we respond differently um, is key. Yeah. So Stockton has a question. I think Stockton looks like Stockton might be the first name. James last name, could be wrong here. Can you develop ROCD from previous bad relationships? My last two relationships were very rocky. I'm in a good relationship now, but dealing with intrusive thoughts telling me to break up and leave. Um, what are your thoughts, Daniela, on this one?
Yeah, I think it's really common. It's really common to have previously a bad relationship and after that struggling with OCD in a healthy relationship. So yeah, I think could be normal. Yeah. And I want to tell you that I think uh, the compulsion to break up is really common in this case, but UCRP is the unique power we have, because OCD is really strong when you want to leave and quit the
Mhm.
relationship. You need to remember you have OCD and you can deal with it with ERP, absolutely.
Yeah. I've been working with people with relationship OCD for several years now, going on 6 or 7 years. And it's really common, and I experience the same thing, to not have it as bad in not so good relationships, and it to be worse when you get into a better relationship. And I think that's because in some way we know that the other relationships aren't going to work out. So we're maybe not quite as invested or worried. The healthier relationships can be more triggering because the safety of them can actually feel scary, right? Um, and so essentially, hi, Felipe. Essentially, you most likely had anxiety or OCD tendencies before this relationship, but the previous triggers in past relationships, and then maybe that created a lack of trust in yourself, maybe that created a lack of trust in other people, but those can contribute to OCD being more triggered, your fears being more triggered, your self-doubt being triggered. So it's not a one size fits all. Not everybody has anxiety previously who develops OCD, but most do. And most of us don't really know how to deal with discomfort and uncertainty very well. So it gets worse over time. And then these life experiences, like these bad relationships, start to create negative beliefs and fears that then gets worse over time. So again, it's not always that thing that triggered it, or that caused you to develop ROCD. It can just be more life experiences that do make you more anxious and harder to trust yourself until you find the right tools on how do I deal with fear? How do I deal with doubt? How do I deal with uncertainty? And basically, that's leaning into them instead of running away from them. And when we do that, the things that used to trigger you won't trigger you anymore because you'll feel really confident in dealing with those. So yeah. So the urge to break up is the compulsion, right? If I leave this relationship, then I'll feel better. This will all go away. And that's not actually the case. You'll probably have at least an obsession. You'll still obsess about relationships outside of it. You may even obsess about the past and then worry about the future. And then OCD comes back in the next relationship. So I know this is really hard to grasp, but going through this process in your current relationship, going through the recovery process in this relationship is the best thing that you can do for this. And it is scary and it is uncomfortable, but it will completely change your life for the better, as Eric and I were talking about earlier. So good. Stockton, what kind of help are you getting for this right now? I would love to know, and help you see if you're on the right track to overcome this and start to really enjoy this relationship that you're in. And any other questions you guys have, feel free to post
Yeah,
them.
another thing is when you have a breakup previously, you have the fear that the relationship when you are experiencing could finish in the same way. So you have this fear. And OCD is really common that OCD is attaching in it.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it was this case. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, I think it's something you need to work on.
Yeah. Absolutely. Definitely a challenge, but in the moment we have all these feelings, right? The feeling that I'm never going to get better, the feeling that how can I even turn this relationship around when it looks a certain way today? How can I get my feelings back? How can these thoughts ever go away? Like when we get really stuck in these moments and in these feelings. But what I want you guys to know is when we're in all those negative feelings, everything looks negative. You're seeing life and your relationship or whatever through a very negative lens. When we're feeling really good, we're seeing through this very positive lens, right? Like, oh, did I even have OCD? Like, what was that? Maybe it wasn't even OCD. That's no big deal now, right? So we tend to see through these filters of how we're feeling in the moment, and we have a hard time seeing outside of that. So if you're feeling like you're really in the rabbit hole, you're stuck, you can't imagine life being different or better, it's really important to understand that your feelings are not facts. Just because you're feeling hopeless today and you can't see outside of the situation that you're in means absolutely nothing about what life can be like. Because I've been in that place where life felt hopeless, my relationship felt hopeless. I thought I would never, have a healthy relationship or be happy, and that couldn't be furthest from the truth. So, one thing that you guys can really practice today is when you start feeling a certain way and predicting your life based on your feelings right now, catch that and stop yourself, because your feelings are not facts. They're just a momentary experience based on the thoughts and beliefs and actions that you're engaging with in the moment. And all of that can be changed by changing the way that you respond to those thoughts and feelings and actions. So, okay, right now I'm just reading books, journaling, and walking on just exposing myself to the fear, which in this case is just being in the relationship, texting, and being around her when we can. Okay, good. Hopefully that's helpful for you. That's often not enough to completely overcome OCD, but if you're somebody who will read a book, well, first of all, if the book gives you actionable exposure and response prevention tools, and you're someone who's good at applying those tools into your life, then you could actually, do pretty well with that. Most of us aren't that great at it, and we struggle, and a book isn't enough. So, and it might be for you. Again, not to discourage you, but just to kind of guide people in the right direction. OCD can be very loud. It can be very uncomfortable. It can be very debilitating. So if you find that whatever you're doing isn't enough or it isn't working, and by the way, the right help, people in the Path to Love program for relationship OCD, they start to experience results within the first week or two as they're using the tools. So whatever you're doing as far as your recovery modality, my biggest advice for anybody out there is, number one, get help. Number two, make sure you're getting the right help, which at the minimum is ERP. And number three, if it's not working or you're not seeing some sort of shift within, a couple weeks or so, then either talk to the person you're working with and find out why and what you can do differently, or look at something different. Because there's a lot of stuff out there that people will say they can help you with OCD that actually doesn't work. So, but books can be very helpful. Books can provide you with actionable tools that you can use. We just have to apply them, because with OCD, we often want to read and ingest all this information, and that's not what actually makes OCD better. What makes OCD better is changing your response to the thoughts and feelings that you're getting, and that's what changes your neural pathways and your brain chemistry and your actions, and that's how you experience recovery and stopping that OCD cycle. And I'd love to know from you, Danielle or Erica, did either one of you try, books as part of your recovery journey? I did not. Books was one thing that I did not do. I think I did everything else.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. Yes, I've read the book, but I think it was helpful.
Which
At the
book
end
did
of
you
the
read?
day, it's an Italian book. Um, I love him or not, something like this. I love them or not. And it was very helpful. But honestly, your program for me was something really, I think, a breakthrough. Your tools for me were and are really important uh, to to go out from OCD. So yes, for me, I can I think I would say to James, maybe he needs to consider something else, something more, because a book it's not enough, I think, for OCD, unfortunately. And some therapists, I think, misunderstand some OCD topics, and OCD in general, or in Italian, for example, is really misunderstood. It's like it's treated like just a phase or something to investigate in the relationship, and we know it's getting OCD worse.
Yeah. Yeah. What about you, Erica? Did you read any books that were helpful?
Um, no, I think a lot of things were very triggering. The
Mm.
only thing I kept relying on for a while was my meditation practice and journaling, because that would help kind of like ease my nervous system, and I would detach from my mind for a little, and then I would have some clarity, and that would help for a little, but then I would start spiraling again. And then, yeah, I found your program at my lowest point
Yeah.
when I realized what was going on, you know?
Yeah. 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 Good feedback. And again, nothing is black and white. Nothing is 100%. So, um, some people can, with books that actually have the right tools, some people can get really good at applying that and get some good results. But yeah, just kind of commonalities. So Stockton said, I've told her a little bit about what's going on. She was very understanding right now. It's just working on not trying to avoid the thoughts. Yeah, I love that. I love that you say you're not trying to avoid the thoughts, because that is an important step. And I'm glad you shared with her that you were struggling, and that she was understanding. Most people are. And, relationships are all about going through ups and downs with somebody. And it's a great way to see how somebody handles something difficult or challenging or personal. And of course, it can take its toll if someone isn't getting better or isn't getting treatment. It can really take its toll on the relationship. So, but it sounds like you're at least starting out on the right track. And that's awesome. I'm really proud of you for the work that you're doing so far. Yeah. Vandela says, do you have any tips for practicing acceptance? I easily get stuck in my OCD fears, and sometimes it gets stuck in my body like headaches. Yeah, so it sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, if it feels like it's getting stuck in your body like a headache, there's a couple things going on. Either you might be hyper focusing on the feeling in your body, so it's making it stronger and worse. And so it can, mental affects the physical and vice versa. And so also what causes headaches, which I used to get a lot of, is just the rumination, the analyzing, the mental compulsions. And so the more you do those mental compulsions, it can definitely cause headaches. And actually, sorry, I meant to show these. And yeah, so acceptance. If you're just practicing acceptance of the thoughts as your main recovery tool, you're only going to get so far with that. Acceptance is really important. Acceptance that you had a thought, acceptance that you had a feeling, but then there is a step beyond that that's really important, which is learning to accept the uncertainty. If you're afraid of the uncertainty, accepting what that uncertain thought is about, that might happen, or accepting the imperfection, with whatever your brain is focusing on, really leaning into acceptance of that thing. Exposure is actually the best way to accept. So an example of an exposure exercise would be, let's say, again, going back to relationship OCD, let's say you're afraid that you're making the wrong decision and you're, what if I'm choosing the wrong partner, right? So as you work on accepting that you're even getting these intrusive thoughts, you're going to say to yourself, yep, this thought came. It can be here. You can be here. I'm not going to focus on you, but you can be here, right? And so the more you tell yourself to that thought, you can be here, or thoughts or discomfort or whatever that thing is, yep, you can bring it on, right? That is exposure, but it's also acceptance. You're telling yourself and you're teaching your brain that you're accepting that thought. We're not talking about the content. We're just accepting that you've gotten a thought. Also, yeah, maybe this relationship will work. Maybe it won't. When you do an exposure like that, you're teaching yourself to accept that it may or may not work. So exposure is so much more beneficial than just general acceptance. And that's why people often get stuck. But acceptance of, yes, I had that thought. Yes, I'm uncomfortable. Yes, I have OCD. Yes, my partner's going to be imperfect. Yes, I might get sick. Yes, there's germs everywhere. Yes, my environment's imperfect, whatever that is. The more exposure you do, the more acceptance you're going to have, because you're teaching your brain to accept it versus trying to change it, fix it, or get rid of it. Vandela says, I try to let it be and expose myself, but it feels hard in my body. So I thought that feeling full acceptance for what is might help. Yeah, so you say it feels hard in my body. Not sure exactly what you mean there, and it doesn't even matter. It just feels whatever it feels like for you. We're learning to do hard things. We're learning to allow discomfort, and you want to just keep doing it, because that's how we get comfortable with that previously hard thing, is by doing more of it. And with OCD, we often avoid doing hard things. We avoid doing uncomfortable things. We're just always seeking that comfort zone. And that's not a healthy place to be, because life is changing, life is uncomfortable, and we want to get more comfortable in that space, which is what exposure does. So it sounds like you're trying to do some really good things. You just want to keep practicing. It's a practice, right? These are skills that we're learning. And yeah. So any thoughts sorry, I kind of went on a tangent there. Any thoughts that have come up for you, Daniela? For Erica in regards to this? I'll let you start, Daniela.
Yeah, I was thinking I experienced something similar in the past. And I remember I had too much rumination in my head. So in this case, I think I can suggest to her to do something else. In the real method, we say start to acting like the person you want to be. It's it's really important, because if you are stuck in rumination, it's really normal to have ADH and something else in the body, because emotions, thoughts affect emotions, and emotions affect the body in some way. So it's really important to do something else after ERP in this case. Immediately start doing something important for you and show up for yourself.
Yeah. Action is the biggest way to get out of a rut, right? Taking an action in some sort of direction can really keep you from feeling stuck in just indecision or rumination or, yeah. Good, good. Yeah, so Stockton said, I did talk therapy and CBT therapy prior. Yeah. And as you probably know, talk therapy does not work for OCD. We just end up feeding the obsession. And then CBT therapy, exposure and response prevention, is a CBT technique, but the CBT techniques outside of exposure and response prevention actually are very small effect on OCD. And that's because the CBT techniques that people often use are to analyze the thought, to kind of look and see, is it really a valid thought? And that becomes very compulsive for people with OCD. Sometimes we can reach that rational place, but most of the time that part of the brain is actually shut down. And then another technique would be to, take a negative thought and make it more positive, which turns into giving ourselves reassurance, which is another compulsion to try to alleviate the discomfort. So those CBT techniques are very, very good. I teach them in my program, but not for OCD. They're very good for general negative thoughts, depression, and things like that. They're just not good techniques for OCD. But a lot of people will use these modalities as an end-all be-all for everything, not realizing that they actually don't really work for OCD. So, but really common. Unfortunately, there's a long ways to go with the recovery tools. So, what kind of, did you try either talk therapy or CBT therapy, Erica? Because I'll tell everybody, I've tried talk therapy, hypnotherapy, EMDR, ketamine treatments, microdosing, gut health diets, Cheryl Paul's course. Again, that's a great one for anxiety, not for OCD. Attachment styles, just to name some. I'm sure there's a couple more that I tried. So none of that stuff works for OCD, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think I did talk therapy, and I did multiple different therapists, and it was not helping at all. And what else did I try? I did try microdosing.
Mm-hmm.
That was, I mean, that's just like a shift in feeling and thought for a small time, and then it all creeps back in again. What else did I try? I think that was about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There's a lot of area for improvement in mental health, and I've actually turned to, since I started doing this, in a lot of areas, if my regular doctor can't address something right away, I've often turned to people like myself who've had lived experience, had the results, and that's who I go to now, because I have found that a lot of areas, I just get a lot more help from those people versus some of the areas in our mental and physical health fields. They just don't know how to help many times. So it's unfortunate, but my belief is there's a solution out there for everything, and not that everything can just, again, OCD, there's no pill yet that's just going to take OCD away, right? But there is a solution. The real method that I teach helps people get to the recovery stage, learn how to stay in the recovery stage, and be able to keep OCD quiet long term. And, I've been there for multiple years, and over the years, I'll continue to tell you what my journey is like. But OCD is no longer something that, negatively affects my life. It doesn't control my life. I have to stay aware. I have to stay aware that I'm not letting my brain go back into that OCD cycle, because it sometimes wants to. But we can be in control when we know what to do, how to do it, and we make it a lifestyle, which is pretty cool. So yeah. What other questions do you all have? Lots of good ones so far. What kind of struggle do you guys find yourself in right now? Or I would love to hear from you. What works for you? What has worked for you and does work when you do it? Which CBTs are the best for OCD? So we just kind of mentioned that. Maybe you just hopped on. Cognitive behavioral therapy is it's a way of changing how you deal with your thoughts, how you respond to your thoughts. And ERP by far is the best thing for OCD. It's a strong foundation for my real method, although the method adds on some additional important things like being able to help you recognize before the cycle starts, reminding you to get those compulsions all the way to zero. Those are things that are often missing in ERP therapy. But the other cognitive behavioral therapy tools just end up having you kind of analyze the thoughts, try to figure them out, which goes down a rabbit hole, trying to change negative thoughts into positive. There is a newer technique called ICBT, inference-based cognitive behavioral therapy. And I actually had a client who her recovery progress was going, I would say, slower than the average, and she wanted to try it. So I got a manual and workbook for ICBT, and we did some of the techniques together, just with an open mind, like, hey, let's try this. And there was one part of it that we found helpful, but she actually went back to the real method, and she's doing amazing now and prefers it. Because like other CBT techniques, ICBT has you kind of taking the thought, questioning the validity of it. What can be helpful is it does teach you to stop in a moment where you're having a thought or a feeling and to say, okay, is there anything happening in my environment? Can I see, hear, taste, smell, or feel anything going on in my environment that would be a reason for me to be anxious right now? And most of the time, the answer is no, right? Most of the time, it's coming from our head. And so I found that to be an interesting way of looking at it, to say, okay, there's nothing dangerous going on in my environment, so it must be coming from here. And for some people, that's going to be helpful. For other people, they don't care where it's coming from. It still feels real, right? So her and I both, again, didn't find it to be the most helpful. I'm sure there's some other, maybe techniques that somebody who specializes in it might use that could be helpful. But ICBT is something that people use when ERP isn't effective. But what I've found is that ERP is always effective. It's just that the person either isn't doing it enough, or they're not doing it properly, or they don't have enough support in doing it. So when all three of those come into place, when they have the support, when they're doing it properly, and when you do it enough, it always works. It's just that some people have to start really slow. Some people just aren't doing it enough. They're doing a little bit of exposure, but they're not doing enough response prevention. So they're doing a ton of compulsions. And if that's the case, you're only going to see a little bit of a benefit. Or if you're not doing it all, you're too afraid to do it. What we would do is we would start very, very small and slow. And in my first coaching session in my programs, my clients and I do an exposure exercise together. And when we do this, their discomfort goes from wherever it's at, let's say a 9 out of 10, down to 0 every time. So it works, and they just have to be willing to practice it on their own. I've never had it not work. And so, yeah. So the answer to this question is absolutely ERP is very, very important. But having a good teacher can be important, because there are some teachers out there who I've heard just don't quite do it properly. You want that to be, if you're going to go to therapy, you want that to be their main solution. You want them to be doing it with you in the session every time. You want them to be telling you to do it every day in between sessions. You want to be increasing the difficulty over time. What else? It's something that you're going to use really for the rest of your life, but it's really, 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 really effective. And again, it can feel scary. Were you scared to do it at first, Erica?
Yeah, I'm reminiscing about our sessions when I joined the program, and how helpful it is to have an actual OCD coach that knows how to do ERP, because OCD can be so confusing. And I was just thinking about, I had a session with you and I was having groinal responses, but I didn't know how to express that to you in that moment. I didn't know I didn't know there was such a thing in OCD.
Yeah.
And when I was trying to explain it to you, you're like, oh yeah, it's groinal responses. And I was like, oh my God, thank God. Like, such a relief that you knew exactly what I was talking about,
Yeah.
and you helped me through it. And that's one of the beautiful benefits of having an OCD coach that specializes in it. They're going to know, they've experienced usually, and they can just help you, like, get you right on your way.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. Daniela, was exposure scary for you at first? And how did it
Yes,
turn
at
out?
the beginning it was really scary. I remember sometimes I said it to you, but with the time, I was sure ERP was exposures were okay, were the right thing for me. So with the time, I was okay with that. Yes.
Yeah, good. Once people see how effective they are, it really motivates you to do it more, to practice, and they're never fun. I don't really have to do the prolonged ones anymore. From time to time, I do. I just do quick ones now, but they're never fun. It's kind of like brushing your teeth or, all that stuff that we have to do that's like, doing this because, I want clean teeth and I want good breath, but it's not fun. But it's very, very worth it. So if anybody out there's listening and you feel afraid to do it, you don't have to push yourself too far. You can start small, you can get support doing it, but you'll see the first time you do it, if you're doing it with the right person, you'll feel your body relax and you'll see the discomfort just fade away. And here's the interesting thing. That's not the purpose of exposure. The purpose of exposure is actually to lean into, right? The uncertainty, the discomfort, the imperfection. But when we do that, it's amazing how your amygdala just lets go of the fear and the discomfort little by little by little. And it's pretty amazing. Feels counterintuitive, but it's pretty amazing stuff. Yeah.
And if I could say, after you learn to do ERP and you're aware of the OCD thoughts, you'll begin to recognize, 'cause I know this is a thing, between like, what's my intuition, what's my gut feeling, and what's OCD. So once you've cleared all that mush away from the OCD, you'll get to recognize your intuition again, and you'll be more in tune with that part, and it'll be easier.
Yeah. Yeah. Because the fear does feel very different than intuition. It's confusing when you're in it, but yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, good. What other questions do we have today before we go? I'll give everybody another minute or so. I've had some really good ones so far. Awesome. You are welcome. You're welcome. And we're going to do this every month. So feel free to join us next month. We will be here between myself and my other 4 coaches. I know Jamaris a lot of times has to work at this time, but yeah. Rochelle says, could you do some live sessions or short videos about other OCD themes? Yeah, absolutely. I think what we could do is try to, right now, a lot of my YouTube videos are on relationship OCD, and that's my plan for just the next couple months, but I will get back into other OCD themes. But yeah, we could definitely plan maybe the next one and talk about a couple of other OCD themes that might come up. If you guys have any suggestions on themes that you want to talk about, feel free to post that here in the comments. And we can try to definitely, I want to answer that question on Puro. But yeah, we can kind of plan some videos and see how many people join when we're focusing on maybe 2 or 3 specific OCD themes. Yeah, this is a good one. In your sessions, how do you do ERP for Puro? This is an important question. When I started working with people with OCD, there are some things that I do differently, and I go deeper into because they're the things that I didn't get in ERP therapy. So I worked with 4 very good ERP OCD therapists. OCD therapists who focused on ERP, put it that way. A good OCD therapist will focus on ERP. And throughout my years of recovery, I ended up working with 4 different ones. One was super expensive. The other went on maternity leave, so I switched a couple times. And again, they didn't really teach me what the recovery stage is, how to stay there. And I had a huge relapse about 4 years ago. And this was the when I was already coaching on ERP, but I had this big relapse and I saw a different therapist, and she's the first one to tell me that my compulsions needed to be at 0. And this was a little like kind of mind blowing for me. Maybe it shouldn't have been, because I'd heard don't do compulsions, but no one had ever been so clear as to say, you have to stop them and you have to stop them completely. And for me, that was a much more clearer direction than just don't do compulsions. And so when I learned that, and I learned that the reason why I was in this dip was because I had been taking courses on attachment styles for 6 months, and it was a compulsion sending me down the rabbit hole. I was like, oh my God, like no one's ever told me this before. But she still didn't help me identify all my compulsions, which we'd obviously identified one that I was unaware of. And she did nothing to really help me lower them. And so I realized, not only for my own recovery journey, but with my clients, I need to be helping these people understand what all of their compulsions are. And I need to at least do what I can to help them stop them completely. And so, and this will make sense in a minute. Hang with me. So I created a compulsions tracker. I started a tracker of all the common compulsions that either I had or that I would hear all my clients have. And over the next several months, I would add to it. And it's been pretty solid for a couple years now. But this was a way for me to get clear on what all of my compulsions were. And then I would put a number. Okay, I'm doing this one 10% of the time. I'm doing this one about 50% of the time, and so forth. So I identified all my compulsions. I put a number to them, and I started working on getting them to 0. And I started doing the same thing with my clients. And this made a world of difference. This is how I got to the recovery stage, which I wasn't able to do before, along with, again, being able to recognize the beginning of the cycle and stop it. So this is what led to the real method that I created. The reason why I'm telling you this story is because Pure O used to be described as obsessions without compulsions. That's impossible. And again, this just goes to show how much they didn't know and still don't know about OCD. So it used to be said that, this is when you have obsessions without compulsions. Well, that's impossible. You can't have obsessions without compulsions. So then Pure O was explained as obsessions without physical compulsions or visible compulsions. And as I was coaching, I was like, I haven't met a single person without a physical compulsion. And the reason why I was able to determine this, because I was one of the few people who was actually helping people identify what their compulsions were. When people go to therapy, they're talking about things, but nobody is helping them identify all of their compulsions. So they're not aware that they actually have physical compulsions. So some examples are Googling, searching the internet, asking ChatGPT, asking your partner for reassurance, avoiding, physically checking things, right? All of those are physical compulsions. So I always had this theory that Pure O does not exist because I have yet to meet somebody who doesn't have at least one physical compulsion. Now, some people will say it's no visible compulsions. Again, that's still, these are visible things if you understand OCD. If you don't understand OCD, you may not see that they're compulsions. I was at an OCD conference a couple years ago, and this was actually confirmed to me, which was pretty awesome, by a specialist there who also said pure O does not exist. The reason why this is so important to understand is if somebody thinks that they have pure O and that they're only doing mental compulsions, then they may be working to stop those mental compulsions, but they're not stopping the physical ones or even aware of what those are. And so the cycle is still going. The cycle will stop when you stop compulsions, and it will persist if you continue to do compulsions. So this is why the understanding that pure O exists and what it is and isn't is so important. So does that make sense for you? And so then to rephrase the question, how do we do ERP for just thoughts? I shouldn't say just. How do we do ERP for thoughts and mental compulsions? And so one of my favorite exposure techniques is called imaginal exposure. The reason why it's my favorite is because you can do it with any thought, any time of day, anywhere, anytime. You know, physical exposures, if you're going to go to a place that causes you discomfort, you have to be able to get in the car, drive, and go there, right? So it's a little bit limiting. Imaginal exposure is something that you can do with any thought that's causing you discomfort. So the exposure would be an imaginal exposure, and the response prevention would be practicing not doing those mental compulsions that you're doing. So hopefully that was helpful for you. But that's what I'm really passionate about, because a lot of people think they have pure O, they don't have physical compulsions.
Yeah, and another thing is, I was thinking about this, is that mental compulsion and rumination is the first compulsion in pure OCD.
Mm-hmm.
I think when you are in the pure OCD phase, the main compulsion is rumination, and be
Mm-hmm.
stuck in that, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. But in my experience too, rumination is the biggest compulsion for not all, but most people. It's the hardest one to stop. So, and rumination can be, you can kind of, analyzing can fall under rumination, trying to figure it out, trying to figure if it's true or not. Yeah. Yeah. So, but rumination, in my experience, is probably the hardest compulsion and most common compulsion that everybody has, no matter what subset. Yeah. Yep. So a lot of people ask, well, how do I stop rumination? What I'll tell you, since we're about out of time, is I've done multiple YouTube videos on how to stop rumination. My favorite technique is exposure. It's the opposite of the mental compulsion. So the more exposure you're doing, you're pulling yourself in the opposite direction of the rumination. It's the most effective one. You can also, focus on the present moment, but still some techniques are a little bit more beneficial than others. Yeah. So good. Awesome. Any parting words, Erica?
Trying to think.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think so. I did want to say earlier, if you're experiencing OCD and you're having a hard time, I put "Who do you want to be today" on my fridge when I started your program, and that helped me so much. And I would look at that all the time, and it would just remind me, as I was doing the work, and I just would focus on that, and it helped me so much. And I had my compulsion sheet tracker on the fridge, and I used that religiously, and that helped me be aware of my compulsions as you were talking about them. And
yeah.
And there's so many things that are physical that could be compulsions that you would not even be aware of, like shopping, drugs.
For sure.
So like you said, just being aware of what could be a compulsion.
Yep. Eating, sleeping.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yep. Absolutely. Any parting words for everybody from you, Daniela?
Yeah, today I remember when I started with you, I was in a terrible situation. So I want to encourage everyone to start, because if you are in an OCD phase and you are living a terrible life, you need to start something to get better. And with our program, you get better and better, and you need to start and try. Why not?
Yeah. Awesome. Good. I'm going to put a link to my website in the comments here if anybody is interested in checking out my programs, working with me or Erica or Daniela. Again, we've all had personal recovery experience, and we are here to help you along that journey. And yeah, check it out there, and we will see you next month. Hope to talk to you all soon. And thank you so much for coming. Absolutely. Thank you guys for being here.
Bye, guys.
Bye,
Bye.
guys. Take care.
Bye.